Number one. I'm not usually the type to overthink things or get scared easily, but this incident that happened to me a few months back really stuck with me. I used to babysit for a lot of people in my town. I guess it was an easy way to make a bit of money as a teen. Before this, nothing really crazy or notable had happened to me before, so this really shook me up. I was looking after one of my mom's friend's kids. I'll call him Ryan for the sake of the story. I can't remember exactly, but I think Ryan was about 9 years old at the time, and he seemed like a pretty normal kid. When I first got to the house, the parents showed me around, gave me Ryan's bedtime. You know, the usual. It seemed like it was going to be a relaxing night of watching movies. When the parents left at around 6 p.m., me and Ryan just played Smash Bros. For a couple hours and watched SpongeBob before he went to bed at 9. After he went to bed, I made myself a bowl of cereal and got comfortable on the couch. But not even 2 minutes later, I heard what I thought were footsteps coming from upstairs. At first, I shrugged it off as Ryan going to the toilet or something, but it went on for an unusual amount of time. After another minute or so, I finally decided to go upstairs to check if Ryan was okay. But when I checked his room, he was fast asleep, snoring even. I thought maybe he rushed to bed and pretended to be asleep when he heard me coming up the stairs. So I let him know I heard him and went back downstairs and sat on the couch. About another 2 minutes later, the footsteps started again. This time I was pissed. I went upstairs once again, expecting to see Ryan in a different position in his bed. But this time I noticed something. As I approached the door to Ryan's room, the toilet door across the hall at the other end slowly shut. I quickly peered into Ryan's room, and as much as I didn't want to see it, there he was, in the exact same position as before. My heart stopped. Do I get Ryan out of the house and call the police? Do I investigate myself? Stupidly, I chose the latter. As I edged closer to the bathroom door, a rancid stench filled my nose. There was a strong smell of damp dog, and that's the only way I can really explain it. I grabbed a trophy that was on the cabinet next to me. I hesitated, then quickly swung open the door. Nothing. The room was empty, but the window was wide open. Instinctively, I ran to the window and looked outside to see if I could see anything. At the end of the garden, I caught a glimpse of a ragged, dirty, homeless looking person's body as they climbed over the fence. I woke up Ryan and asked him if he saw anything. He told me he hadn't, and honestly, we were lucky neither of us got hurt. I called the police and told them everything, and they told me to keep all the doors and windows completely closed and locked. They then assured me that there would be an all night patrol of the area. It goes without saying, I didn't babysit again after this. Number 2. This is my first time posting to Reddit, but I had to get this story off my chest. A month or so ago, I had an awful nightmare. I always sleep with my window open. That's important for later. Well, one night I dreamed about someone breaking into my house. Normally, that would be nothing out of the ordinary, but this time it was different. I never had a dream that felt so real. I was laying in my bed facing the window. I remember thinking that it's a bad idea to sleep with it open. I kept staring at the window without thinking too much. It was late at night and I had school tomorrow. Just as I closed my eyes, I spotted something coming through the window. I opened my eyes again to take a second look. I saw a creature trying to get through my window. It just started to stare at me. We watched each other for about 10 seconds before I could react. I jumped out of my bed and slammed the window closed. That thing launched at the glass, but before it smashed into the window, I woke up. I swear to you guys, that was the most terrifying dream I had ever had. It felt more real than my actual life. I needed a long time to realize that everything that just happened was a dream. I stood up, I closed the window, and went downstairs and just cried for about a solid hour. I didn't tell anyone about my dream because I thought it kinda sounded silly. Well, about 4 days later, I was laying in my bed looking at my window. By that time, I had banned the dream from my memory, so I wasn't particularly worried about the opened window. I wasn't worried till I heard something outside. Normally, noises don't really disturb me because I live in a big old house, but this time was different. The noises were from inside our house. They were coming up from our backyard. I got the same awful feeling, the same one that I had after the nightmare. That one feeling you get when you know that shit's about to hit the fan. Immediately, I got up and slammed the window closed. I couldn't believe what I saw. There was a man in front of my window. He was dressed completely in black, so I couldn't make out any other features except for his face. He looked at me, turned around, and ran away. I was baffled. I still can't believe what just happened. I immediately checked all the locks and closed every window in my house. I was never really a believer in the paranormal, but I truly believe the creature in my dream was to warn me. It's safe to say I'll never sleep with the window open again, and now I believe in deja vu. Number 3. My son has always been special. He's not evil or bad, just emotionally fragile. He cries a lot. He wears clothes that doesn't go over very well with the kids at his high school. Iron shirt, beige cotton dockers, a sports jacket, bow tie, polished black shoes. He's only 16. During the last couple months, my wife and I had noticed him being extra withdrawn and seemingly depressed. We've asked him if there's something wrong, but he just shrugs his shoulders and said, "Isn't something always wrong?" We were starting to get really worried and were at several meetings at the school. They hadn't noticed his behavior. They said he seemed just like he used to, and that sentence was spoken with a shimmer in the eye as if to say, as weird as he always is. Anyway, he's in jail now. My little Tim, just a fucking child, is awaiting a trial for 3 counts of murder. I understood that something was seriously wrong when I woke up by the thuds coming from his room. I walked to his door and knocked. I could hear him sobbing. I opened the door and he was banging a knife over and over on the floor, carving it up. He cried and was covered with dirt. Seeing him dirty without his shirt tucked neatly into his pants was very unsettling for me. I sat down next to him and asked him what had happened. He shrugged his shoulders and tried to utter the sentence, "I have done something terrible," between the sobs. I held him and tried to get him to stop stabbing the floor. Eventually, we both fell asleep together on the floor. It was heartbreaking to see him like this. I talked to my wife, and we set up a date for him to see a psychiatrist. He went a couple times, and it seemed to actually be helping him a bit. No more crying and stabbing the floor. He was playing video games again like a normal teenager. However, the psychiatrist called me one morning when I was at work. The only thing she said was, "You need to come in so we can talk about Tim. You need to come now and today." I told work there was a family emergency and left. The psychiatrist looked shook. She waved at a chair and told me to sit down. She crossed her legs and was fidgeting nervously with her dress. "Okay, Tim," she sighed. "Tim is not." She took deep breaths. "Okay, I'm sorry to say this, but Tim is not a normal kid." I looked at her surprised. She felt her hair, like feeling uneasy by what she was about to say. "Tim is violent." I started laughing. "Violent? What do you mean? Tim is shy and calm. He never hurts anyone." She looked very severe. "Tim is violent. He has either seriously hurt someone or he will." I started to get angry now and I rose from my chair. "What are you talking about? Tim is a normal kid. You're way out of line for saying something like that." I walked away and slammed the door shut. I came home and was still angry. I paced around my room, not knowing how to control my feelings. After about an hour, I noticed how silent it was. My wife wasn't home. She was 8 months pregnant, so she never really left the house. I went looking for her in the kitchen and saw a note. "I'm not home. We'll be gone for a couple weeks. Love, P." I went upstairs to talk to Tim. I heard the thuds again. He was banging the knife against the floor, crying. I sat down next to him. "Dad, I need to tell you something." I looked at him and said, "You can tell me anything, Tim." He started crying even more and couldn't even look at me as he took a deep breath to utter the words, "Dad, I kill women." Lightning bolts shot through my stomach. "What do you mean?" He started crying even more, but then in a split second his face changed and he started laughing. "I'm just kidding. Did you really believe me? Wow, you're so gullible, Dad." I laughed too and hugged him. I went to bed that night. My mind was racing. The meeting with the psychiatrist, my wife's sudden whim to leave for a couple weeks, let alone being 8 months pregnant, and then my son's very inappropriate joke. I couldn't sleep at all. The crying and the thuds of the knife banging on the floor kept on for days, and meanwhile I couldn't get a hold of my wife. I didn't want to call the police just yet, so I decided to wait for 1 or 2 more days. One Sunday I was working in the yard and I had noticed someone had recently dug a hole and covered it up again alongside the wall of the house. I took a shovel and decided to find out what had been dug down. Just 3 moves with the shovel and I fell on my knees and vomited. A severed hand, a severed leg, intestines, and the head of my wife. I ran up to my son's room and started banging on the door. "What have you done, Tim? Oh my God, let me in. What have you done?" He opened the door. The knife was in his hand and tears were streaming down his face. Between sobs, he said, "I told you, Dad. I kill women. Why the fuck wouldn't you believe me? Who jokes about something like that? It's all your fault." I took a few steps back. "Put down the knife, Tim." He almost couldn't utter the words because he was crying so violently. But what I could make out was, "And now I have to kill you too, Dad." He slowly walked towards me, but I slapped him in the face and took the knife away and pinned him on the floor. The police arrived a while later, and now my son is being charged with the murder of my wife and 2 other women from his school. The psychiatrist was right about Tim. I can't help but wonder what Tim possibly could have said to her, which made her realize what a sick person he actually is. When the police left, I took Tim's knife, sat on the floor of his room, and started stabbing the floor. But I couldn't cry. I tried to, I really did. I cut myself in the hand to bring out a few tears, but nothing. I felt empty, yet guilty. Guilty for not crying. Then I saw something under Tim's bed. I reached and found a jar. In the jar was the corpse of my now born baby floating in water. He even looked like Tim. Number 4. My name is John Adam Kraminski. 2 weeks ago, my brother and I were driving down the highway when we came across a woman and her child asking for a ride. She said that she had driven her car off the road and was just trying to get home, so we decided to pick her up. But what came after still sends chills down my spine. For backstory, about a year ago, a woman was texting and driving when she came to a turn in the highway near our house. Obviously, she didn't see it. She ran right off the highway into the forest near the side. The impact was enough to cause a fire to the engine, and due to her being unconscious and the shitty police response time, both her and her child ended up dying in the wreck. Nothing was reported on the news, seeing it was a case closed situation. Skip forward a week or two after the accident. These 2 teenagers were making the turn on the highway when they reported seeing a young female jump in front of their car. They swerved trying not to hit her and ended up totaling their pickup truck instead. When they told the police what happened, the other cars around them said they never saw a woman, so the police assumed they were intoxicated. Months go by, and multiple people report seeing this on the side of the highway, and some say the woman was just jumping in front of their car. Some even report seeing her holding a baby. Police conducted searches and had a few sketches of the woman, and no one could find out who she was. More people started to report seeing her, and even a few claimed of picking her up and dropping her off at a house a mile or so away, but claimed as they were starting to let her out of the car, she had vanished. Skip forward a few weeks ago, my brother and I were driving into town to see a movie that night. We live roughly a mile away from the highway, and it was storming that night, which meant less people would be out. So we decided we'd pass on taking the usual back roads into town. We merged onto the highway, and as we suspected, no one was there. We drove for about a mile or so before a woman and her baby jumped in front of my truck, and thank God the rain hadn't picked up, Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to brake in time to keep from hitting them. I rolled down my window and peeked my head outside to get a better look.
19.
Hey, miss, are you okay? I asked politely. While staring at her, I realized her clothes had small rips in them. I'm fine, I just need a ride. I looked down for a second and didn't realize it was raining, so I drove my car off the road. Would you be able to take me back to my place? I live not too far from here. Her voice was sweet, but there was something off about it. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Sure, hop in. I'll need your address so I can plug it into my GPS to get us there. When she approached, I realized that she seemed whiter than bone. Let me turn up the heat for you. You must be freezing. She nodded and patted her baby on the back. I started driving. About half a mile before our destination, my brother elbowed me and whispered something strange. She hasn't blinked since she stepped in the car, and from the looks of it, she isn't breathing either. At first, I thought he was just joking around because she was so quiet, but the more I glanced back there, the more it seemed true. When we pulled up to the house, my brother and I unlocked the door for her and turned to her to tell
19.
her to be safe. But when we looked back, she was gone. My brother turned and saw something in front of him. He screamed, and immediately his eyes shut and he started convulsing. His breathing was shallow. In a panic, I called for medical emergencies, informing them of his symptoms. An ambulance arrived and they got his convulsing to cease, but his breathing was still irregular, and they confirmed his heartbeat was high. They asked what had caused it, but due to shock and panic, I told them I didn't know. A few days later, after studying my brother and concluding that he had an anxiety attack that mimicked a seizure, the doctors finally released him from the hospital. On the way home, I asked my brother what he saw before he had passed out, but he just shook his head. We sat in silence for quite some time before he finally said something. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. I told him no matter what he tells me, that it wouldn't change my position on what had happened that night. Then he said something that scared me and still scares me. I saw us on the highway, and you were lying dead on the hood of a truck. The lady
19.
that we picked up there was bloody and smiling as though she was the cause of it and she was proud. She walked over to me and whispered static in my ears, and then she stuck her hand through my chest. You don't understand, John. I could feel her hand gripping my heart. All of it seemed so real. He started crying, and I just sat in silence for a moment. When we got home, my brother suggested I post the story online to see if anyone knows what may have happened. We don't do drugs, we don't drink. Both of us are very skeptical, but after that incident, I don't know what to think. Him and I both agreed we aren't going to take the highway anymore, but the other day, while on the back roads, we had heard a high pitched static for a minute, and then it stopped. Number 5. I'm not sure if you'll believe me or not, but I have to get this out. I don't think it matters at this point, but something inside me is screaming to tell this story. A story that every time I close my eyes, I can see it over and over. A story which infuriates and saddens me as I recall it. I suppose I've been planning on holding it in from the public, not wanting to make others scared to use the app, which this has happened to me on. I'm probably going to die soon after all. However, I fear that if I don't warn you, you might end up with a fate just as horrible as mine. Thus, I think I owe it to you, my audience, to describe the details of a horrid event which has emotionally scarred me. Please just listen, for I only have a few minutes to get this out. I'm certain you've all heard of the app known as TikTok. It's revolutionary, becoming one of the biggest social media companies in such little time. It's a place where anyone can go and lip sync to any song they want, and I'm personally a huge fan of the app. Now, when I say that I'm a fan, I don't exactly mean in the traditional sense of the word. You see, what I like to do is troll others online. I find TikTok videos that I deem cringy and do a duet with them. I often enjoy doing Fortnite dances or the famous Take the L dance to people who think they're being lit on the app, when in reality they just appear to be total dweebs. My funniest video was a reaction to an African lady. Many of you might have seen this video before, but it's a video of a woman with tears staining her cheeks, pleading for food she so desperately needs. Maybe it was wrong to record a reaction video of myself sinking my teeth into a nice, warm, juicy chicken sandwich in front of her, but it was all just for fun. Nothing of consequence ever came out of it, so I continued to mock them online for their stupid habits of posting dumb videos on the internet. I mean, come on, who posts a video of themselves on the internet and doesn't expect to get the piss taken out of them? That's just being oblivious. I was sitting at home one night, listening to the wind howl outside. The rain slammed against the side of my house, and I tried flipping my laptop open in an attempt to distract myself from the incessant noise. I signed into my email account and noticed there was a new message. Curious, I clicked on it. The message hadn't come from any address I recognized, and it read as follows: "Hey dude, I'm a huge fan of your TikTok account. You're really funny, and I find myself laughing a lot at you messing with those internet nerds. Anyways, I made a few videos of me reacting to you reacting to other people. Isn't that funny? Well, I'll leave my username down below so you can check them out. I hope you enjoy." I won't leave the username in the post for reasons which will become obvious later. I checked and opened my phone, readying the TikTok app. I was going to have a lot of fun with this guy. I wanted to see how cringy his reactions were to me. I bet he was just copying my moves. Hell, maybe I could make a reaction to his duet. There were no limitations to how I could troll whoever this guy was, and it was that thought that blinded me from the ugly truth that would soon be apparent. I found his account and watched his videos. Sure enough, there he was reacting to one of mine. I couldn't see his face, as it was covered by some sort of old, creepy baby doll mask. He reacted to me duetting with a kid who did one of those bad boy challenges, and when I started to do the L dance, he did as well. I laughed a bit, thinking it was pretty funny. Then I moved on to the next video, where things suddenly became a bit more disturbing. He stood in a dark room, watching another video of me. This time he didn't move. He just stared into the camera, watching me. This was extremely disconcerting, and when the video ended, a sense of dread overcame me. Who was this man, and what did he want? I moved on to the next video, desperate to find out. There he was, reacting to one of my videos as usual. However, he wasn't looking in the camera. There was now a table in the room, and there was a knife on it. He wiped it with a white cloth, and then proceeded to sharpen the blade. My eyes widened as he looked up at the camera and wagged the weapon around in the air. He then placed a finger over where the lips were on the baby mask, and the video abruptly ended. There were only 2 videos left, and my curiosity piqued. Summoning all the courage within me, I clicked on the second to last video. The setting was extremely dark, and it was no longer a duet video. I listened closely and heard what sounded like the crunching of twigs and the rustling of leaves. I squinted at the video, trying to discern where he was. I simply couldn't, and soon the sound of wind and rain overcame any audio within the video. The final post was apparently uploaded a few minutes ago, and within it contained the most disturbing thing imaginable. There was more and more rustling, and the rain grew more and more persistent. I watched in terror as the camera found itself focused on what appeared to be a house in the distance, illuminated by a porch light. He pointed his knife straight ahead at it, and I could hear what sounded like laughter originating from the camera operator. I knew whose house it was. The shape, the lighting, the surrounding area. It was very clear to me. It was my house. I typed this in a hurry to you, warning you about the experience I'm going through. I don't know how much time I have left, to be honest. I have contacted the police, but I fear they won't make it in time. I can hear something scratching at the door. It sounds like a blade running along the wooden exterior of the house. I need to go, but please heed my warning. Please be careful of your online presence, because there are those out there who have the means to hurt you. I just heard the window shatter. I have to go. If there's no update to this, you know why.